Hiya! Thanks for being here today for this review of The Last of Us 2. Now I'm going to go into spoilers towards the end. What I'll do is I'll drop a little thing down here to let you know what timestamp the spoilers are between. So if you haven't played the game or you don't want to know any more details about it, if you've managed to avoid all the stuff online about this already, then just don't go to that part and just stick with the early part where it'll be much more non-spoilery. Now I played The Last of Us 2 on the PS4. I played the original game when it first came out, absolutely adored it, playing through as Joel and Ellie. I thought it was an amazing game, just a really great story. Naughty Dog did a good job of rooting a zombie game in some level of reality. And based on the success of the last game and how much I really engaged with the characters, the kind of cliffhanger we were left with at the end of the last game, which I will spoil now, where we find out that Joel basically murders all the Fireflies in order to rescue Ellie so that she won't be killed in creating a virus. She has immunity, so that's The Last of Us spoiled for you. But this is a game that I thought was really stellar and outstanding originally. I also played the expansion, so I played through the expansion, so finding out that Ellie has at least had gay experiences in this game. That was interesting as well, and nice to see them address that. So I was looking forward to this game. Now, before I even got to this game, I found out a lot about it, not so much because I read the spoilers, but because there was so much sort of online controversy about the leaks and people venting and giving their opinions in advance of playing the game, which I'm never a big fan of. I don't normally buy games when they first get released. I normally get them later on rental, usually 6-12 months after they've come out. But this was a game that I just wanted to play because I liked it so much, and I'm willing to pay the full price to be able to get my hands on it early, or let's say earlier than I normally would do, and play it through just to see for myself. I'm much more interested in understanding the story for myself. So this game, without going into any particular spoilers at this stage, follows up on Joel and Ellie, but introduces a few new characters. They've obviously arrived at this settlement, and we're introduced to people who we haven't met previously in this series. Everything else is much the same. We have the same kind of baddies in terms of groups of humans. We have the same enemies in terms of the clickers and the various infected. So there's not much that's evolved there. Crafting is very similar. Gameplay itself is really quite similar, but it plays really well as a game. And I still like all the touches that you got the last time round, such as how useful and how effective your companions were. Normally in games your companions can be pretty ineffective, either not shooting or just being basically of very little use to you in combat. But in this game, in the Last of Us series, your companions are excellent. Whoever you've got with you, they really are contributory to your success in actually any potential fighting outcome. And that's nice to see that carried over as well. I wasn't looking for anything new in that area. I think this is only second game in the franchise. I don't need to see new enemies. I don't need to see new crafting. But mainly that's because, let's face it, it's been a few years, 4 years basically, since the end of the last game in the game time. And what really would have changed in terms of enemies? What really would have changed in terms of crafting? How would you suddenly be able to do different stuff? So that kind of stuff, when it's suddenly very different in a sequel, I find breaks immersion. Unlike, for example, the Assassin's Creed games, where you're jumping through all sorts of eras of human civilization. And for me, it would be absolutely sensible that your character would undergo different ways of crafting, different techniques, different weapons, all that kind of stuff. That makes sense in a game like Assassin's Creed when you're jumping through whole eras of civilization. But this game, just a few years afterwards, makes sense that it's very similar. And I found that quite comforting. For the main part to start with, you play as Ellie. And Ellie is basically as she was. I found myself really enjoying playing as Ellie. I was reminded again about what a relief it was in the last game to play as Ellie with her blade. where you're not having to constantly craft shivs in order to, to deal with any clickers, for example. So that was really quite fun to kind of get straight into that kind of easier gameplay style where you have much more stealth and you are a naturally more stealthy character. But the game threw us a little bit of a curveball later by introducing something a little bit different. But again, I liked that too when it came. So now I guess we have to dive into spoiler territory, because you can't go much further without diving into spoilers. But all I'll say without going that far is that I thought the game was great. I loved the story. I thought the way it handled its characters was really good. I thought the characters were very well crafted. And for something that's been dismissed as a simple revenge story, I didn't think it was that simple at all. I think it was quite deep. It had a lot of sort of very meaningful moments for all the characters, and I do mean all the characters. But for me, most of all, the thing that I think is a stamp and the mark of a really, really great game, and this game weighs at about 30, 35 hours, something along those kind of lines, maybe 25 hours if you really speedrun it, is that at not one point did I even feel tempted to want to skip a cutscene. I don't even know if the game gives you the ability to skip cutscenes, to skip dialogue scenes between characters, because I was glued to it, glued to every single minute of the game. I've played longer games like The Witcher 3, where you've got a lot of busy work. It's really good busy work. It's not like, sort of fetch quests, but it is busy work nonetheless, where you're doing side quests, etc. And I love those. But even at times when you're dealing with similar sort of interactions, the temptation to skip through certain scenes and certain pieces of dialogue can be quite high, especially when you deal with a longer game. I didn't get that temptation once in this game. Like I said, I've got no idea if you even can skip the cutscenes first time around, second time around, because I was just watching, loving the way the story was unfolding, really loving the craft of it. It wasn't until afterwards that I formed any opinion on the story whatsoever. I was engrossed all the way through, loved what it was doing, what it was saying to me, really enjoyed the way it was telling the story. And it's not till the end that I guess I would look back and reflect on whether it is a good story. I think you have to get to the end of a story to understand that. The tester is, can you get to the end? Does it grip you? Gripped me the whole way through. I'd give this game I think a 9 out of 10. I'm going to go back and play it through again on a New Game Plus. It's got the potential to be a 10 out of 10 for me. Just interested to see how replayable it is, knowing everything I know now, and whether I see anything different. But I'm looking forward to playing it again, and that's as good a test as you can make as any. So, 9 out of 10 for me. Let's talk some spoilers. This game is very LGBT friendly, or at least very LGBT inclusive. As I said previously, we'd already found out at the end of The Last of Us that Ellie is, she has at least had one relationship with a girl. So she's at least had one lesbian experience. And it's confirmed pretty early on in the game that she is actually gay. We have a character who's a friend of hers in Dina. We're introduced to their relationship through a sort of drunken kiss that they share at a party and the fallout from that. So Dina is, I guess you would say, probably bisexual in terms of the fact she's just come out of a long-term relationship with a guy and is a kind of off and on relationship and is attracted to and starts a relationship up with Ellie. We basically follow through Ellie's journey, and then big spoilers now. So again, this is your last warning. As 3-4 hours, depending on how fast you're playing into the game, Joel is killed. So our hero from the last game, also to my mind our villain from the last game, Joel is killed in an act of, let's say, extreme violence, beaten to death, by a group who have clearly been looking for him for some time. They've been on the hunt for Joel, looking for him. And this all happens in front of Ellie. Ellie is left unconscious and swears revenge. And we're following her revenge story, going after the people who attacked and killed Joel. specifically this one character, Abby, who is a really quite large, very muscly young woman, who was clearly there to get some form of revenge against Joel. Not sure to start with what, but if you played the first game, the implication is very heavily that these are Fireflies and they're taking revenge for Joel's massacre of the Fireflies in rescuing Ellie at the end of the last game. So you follow through with Ellie as she goes off with Dina looking for revenge. Other characters kind of drop in every now and again, turning up by surprise. They find out that Tommy, which is Joel's brother, has gone off seeking revenge, and Ellie goes off with Dina in order to ostensibly to bring Tommy back, but also frankly to get the revenge for herself. As Ellie, you kill your way through all of the people who were there as witnesses to Joel's death, who were part of it, and you take them out as enemies, as baddies, extracting your revenge. There are plenty of scenes where you're forced to kill. Essentially, you only have the option to hit the square button, and you are forced to kill. I found myself wanting the option to not do that. And the fact that I was pushed into doing that to proceed in the story, I had to take the decision to extract Ellie's revenge for her. It's what happened in the last game, and it's interesting to see that employ that tactic again, because it's kind of pushing you into being the character. I didn't want to do that. I was pushed into doing what Ellie needed to do as her character. So it's that kind of story. You're led through what the character needs to do. It's not about what you want to do. That's really the point of this. And it starts with Ellie, just like in the last game it was with Joel. I didn't want to rescue Ellie. I wanted to have the choice to not rescue Ellie at the end of the last game. But I felt, I felt the dynamic. I felt the urge to want to save Ellie, but to know that this could be the wrong thing to do. But again, the game forced me down a path, and they were trying to tell a story, and they're doing that again this time. Eventually, you are confronted by Abby. So Abby, this really muscly big girl, she confronts you, kills one of your companions, and we have this standoff with Abby. You then take over the game as Abby, and you now play through as Abby for half the game, leading up from her perspective through her past, learning about what happened. You find out that Abby is actually the daughter of the surgeon who was going to perform the surgery on Ellie in order to find the cure. And what's really interesting is that Abby, I didn't think it was explicitly stated, but it's strongly hinted that Abby is transgender, that she is a trans girl, trans woman, and at various points in her upbringing, you see her, I guess, going through various stages in her development. What's clear though is that having had this tragedy happen to her, she has focused an awful lot of her attention on being physically strong, on being capable and a contributor, a fighter, partly to contribute, but also partly to get her revenge. So her muscle lends an air of, let's say, masculinity to her character, as do other hints that take place in the game that she is a trans woman. Later on in the story, she also meets a trans boy. I say boy because of the age, but a trans boy. Again, a member of a different group that you're introduced to, the Scars as they're called, by Abby. You're introduced to this group, the Scars, and we're introduced to Lev. And Lev is a character who is a trans boy. Someone who's viewed as an apostate, someone who has gone against the will of their tribe, of their group, in expressing a different gender. Basically, Lev was destined for being a wife. You're essentially, as a woman, you would be either a wife or you'd be a warrior in this kind of culture. and once assigned the role of wife instead of warrior, was now pigeonholed into a societal role that they couldn't cope with. I think the implication is that had they been in, because this is like a post-apocalyptic world where, gender reassignment surgery isn't on the table, it's not something that you could have done. But the implication is that had Lev been assigned the role of warrior, other than wife, potentially might have been able to cope, might have been able to disguise the dysphoria and live within that community for a longer period of time into adulthood. But once assigned the role of wife, once assigned a role that was based on birth sex, not on gender, good stuff, had to express themselves, shaved their hair, and was therefore hunted and cast out from the tribe. Not only cast out, had to flee in order to be able to just survive being hunted down. And this is amazing. It's really interesting to see this done. It's very kind of bang on. It's very of the moment, I guess you would say. But this is a game that's been in development for many years. Clearly, it's been several years since this game's been in development. And it's great to see this kind of representation. I don't need all of my games to have this kind of representation. It's absolutely not necessary. But to see these well-rounded, kind of lived-in characters that you can play through as, if you're Abby, you can play through as, and you can see their story unfold. And if you approach it open-minded, you are able to go on that journey with that character. And even though it's difficult at times, perhaps initially, to play as a character who's killed off Joel, killed off one of your most beloved, characters in the series, I still found it quite easy to slip into that role and to let the story tell itself to me as they wanted to do so. So, all in all, we end up at this standoff, and there's a fantastic moment in the standoff where we have 4 characters on screen, basically on screen at the same time. Those characters consist of lesbian, bisexual, a trans boy, and strongly hinted at a trans woman. That's our 4-way standoff in the game. And that's unheard of. I've never seen that before. But it's absolutely not impossible. It's perfectly reasonable. We exist. People like that exist in this world. And for them to meet up, though, potentially rare in a post-apocalyptic society, it's not ridiculous. And to tell that story, especially a story of being thrown out, being cast out, being unwelcome because of who you are, it's powerful and really, really interesting. So I won't go into the end of the game, but essentially you follow these characters through. I thought it was fascinating watching this all develop. I thought that the way we got to understand Abby, I did empathize with her. I did feel that she had a point. What happened to her, she was someone who was directly affected by Joel's actions. And even though I find the whole revenge thing, even from the first game, I find the whole revenge thing to be a little bit difficult because I don't think I have it in me to do that. I think it's still a potential in all of us, and therefore you can understand it. I just felt that overall the characters were quite relentless in the pursuit of their actions, and what I had to do as an individual, even though I would have done something different, as I said in the first game, I wouldn't have done what Joel did. I felt that in this game we were being taken to a very deliberate conclusion, and that if you wanted to go a different way, even more so than the last game, this game was taking you somewhere very definite, very deliberate, and there were going to be no options to get out of that. And I can understand therefore why, if you weren't into it, if it wasn't your thing, then I can understand why that could potentially be frustrating. But equally so, I think if you'd gone into this with an open mind, if you go into this with an open mind, there's an interesting story here. And it's not inconsistent with what they did in the last game. It's the same as what they did in the last game. I was forced to make a choice, or I was forced to undertake an action I didn't want to do. But still loved the game, thought it was a 10 out of 10. So that's the spoiler review. I think this is an important game. I think the amount of vitriol that's being poured onto this game by people, the amount of people who are saying that this is social justice warrioring, it's snowflake behaviour, it's something that is forcing people to think a certain way. Well, I think that's a little bit of tough luck. I guess most people would be fine to ignore this game if it was a small indie game, PC game, for example, something like What Remains of Edith Finch, a small sort of a kind of game that only appeals to a certain type of person. But this game is crafting, it's guns, it's violence, it's the kind of stuff that appeals to your typical guy. That kind of game, the first game, really appealed to your typical guy. And if a few people were forced to play through a story that was outside their comfort zone, fine. I don't think that matters. And yeah, I have to play loads of games where I don't really enjoy the characters. And, you know, I live with it. I think Kratos is, you know, a complete a-hole. I hate Kratos. Games are fantastic. Love playing the games. I can't stand Kratos. So what are you going to do? You know, I don't complain about it. So thank you for watching this review. Let me know in the comments down below. Have you played the game? Is it something you like? I'm sure most of you perhaps aren't even into this kind of stuff. But you can get a hold of me in the comments down below. I look forward to hearing from you. You can reach me through my email address, which is juliettesnoir@gmail.com. I look forward to talking to you all again soon. As ever, bye. Bye.